So I'm going to try to walk through the presentation as I demonstrate things as well. So the first one is, what is analog? And the easy answer of what analog is it's driving the track rather than the train or the locomotive. So with analog, you're basically running power. Everybody probably recognizes one of this, your basic LGB controller. And let me plug it in. In analog, basically as I increase the voltage, the train goes one direction. I change the dial, it changes the polarity on the track, the train goes the other direction. That's basically what you get with analog. Kind of boring. You can do more with it, but it's still pretty limited. And when you start running more trains and things and you want them to do different things, you have to do all kinds of crazy wiring and insulating different track sections, and you have to have a controller per each insulated track section to run your trains. Makes it pretty complicated. So my slide is controls one train per electrical track section. Analog is ideal for running your train around your Christmas tree. And then analog is basic, no frills. While sound may be added, it's usually pretty limited what you can do with it. If you want the whistle to blow at a time, you have to put a magnet in that track at where you want the whistle to blow. Hopefully the engine works that way too. It has the sound. Go ahead. Okay, now that I have it switched over, each locomotive on a DCC system will have its own address. And that address is assigned, you can assign that, or it's assigned when they're set up initially. So that's how you control each train with your controller via DCC, is by addressing that locomotive. The power is sent through the track with a digital signal. And that signal is sent to that address. Kind of like sending a postcard or something like that to somebody. If you just send it out to some random place, like you do with analog, you never know where it'll get. With a digital signal, you're sending it to the address, somebody's street address or whatever. So with a digital signal and digital control, I can go completely wireless. This is using a radio communication to talk to the base station. Turn on the headlights. Turn on its sound now that I've added sound to it. All kinds of fun things with that. So with digital, you also have a whole endless possibilities of what you can do with the locomotive. You can change how it works. You can add all kinds of crazy sounds to it. But the trick is understanding where and how and what's DCC, what's DCC ready. So what is DCC? DCC stands for Digital Command Control. And a lot of people I know say, well, that's too complicated. They don't understand what those acronyms actually mean, or they may understand the words. What it means in practice is the key. You can independently control and or drive your locomotive. Let me switch over to our DCC system. I have my slide that talks about some of the limitations of both analog and DCC. Was what does not DCC ready mean? So in the electronics aspect of it, a analog locomotive, especially the earlier ones, will have the motor and the power pickups together. Oftentimes they might break a circuit out of those that runs the lights and so on. So the motor blocks, if they have the power pickups in their motor blocks and the motor in the motor blocks, they'll have 3 wires coming out of it. That's not DCC ready. because what happens digitally is that power comes up off the tracks, goes into the decoder, and then back to the motor or the lights or what have you. So when it's not DCC ready, that is the main point, is that the motor block won't support it. Now, motor blocks can be converted. Oftentimes with LGB, the motor blocks have been updated over the years. So you can just replace the entire motor block with a newer motor block, or at least the plastics for it. So that's the main thing of what not DCC ready is. So DCC ready just means that it's ready for taking a decoder and being digitized. It may or may not have a socket inside, so you can just plug the decoder in. A lot of times they don't anymore. And then a lot of your locomotives today, if you bought one with sound in it, will have a digital decoder. They don't use standalone sound cards anymore. And with companies like Phoenix going away, you don't really have any analog sound cards available. For reference, I have two different rail trucks with me. This one is analog only. No frills on it, no lights. Commonly asked questions. Is DCC track power? Answer is yes. Simply it is yes. As it sends the digital signal and the power through the rails. They carry both the control or that digital signal and the power to drive the locomotives, or the commands to drive the locomotives. DCC wireless? No, not really, because it is technically track power. And you'll hear people say, well, my CVP air wire is digital. No, it actually isn't. You cannot physically send a digital signal through the airwaves. So a digital signal is a square wave, up, down, up, down. A analog signal, or AC, is a sine wave. So it's these nice curves. Those are what get sent through the airwaves. So yes, the airwire receiver will add those digital signals to drive a decoder, but the information going to that is not digital. So, like my handheld here, it communicates with the base station via radio waves. Now, that can also be a Wi-Fi radio, and I can have an app on my phone or tablet to drive the trains. And there's a few different apps that are available, and you can also use Bluetooth, as the Blue Nami now uses. But that again is radio. Do I need 20 amps for DCC? That's a fun one. No. A lot of people get that confused because they're thinking about analog, where you do need that power to help push the voltage. In DCC, when it's on the tracks, if you put an analog device on there, it'll think it's alternating current. And just like the Tesla and Edison current wars, they proved that AC travels around smaller wires for a much further distance without having all the extra boosters and so on in line. So that's another neat thing with DCC, is that for large layouts, you really, most of the time, you only need 2 wires going to it. And you can get away with your standard LGB, whatever gauge wire that is, which is not very big. You also don't need to have, people talk about, well, I have to have all these interconnections. Not really. As long as your track has good continuity across between all those sections and everything like that, you don't even have to have all those lines of wires going to it. Is DCC expensive? It's like anything in this hobby. It comes at varying prices. There's varying DCC systems. Some are at an entry-level price point that don't cost, I don't know, $300-400. You can walk out the door with a DCC system. It may not do as much as some of the more sophisticated or costly DCC systems, but it does work. So, I mean, it's kind of a variable cost in that one. Is it expensive? Not any more expensive than, say, a Bridgeworks transformer. And those things are, those things are expensive. Can I run analog trains on digital? Unfortunately, no. They did try that for a while, but it became too liable because it would burn up components in your analog locomotive. So, I mean, if I put my little analog locomotive that I brought and put it on the tracks, it'll sit there and make all kinds of nasty noises and eventually burn the motor up. It's just not worth it. At that point, you would have to just basically upgrade them. Is dead rail DCC. And that gets into your Airwire and Revolution controllers and things like that. What that is basically you're getting a radio signal from your handheld device, whether it's your phone or a physical handheld device is immaterial. That radio signal is going to the locomotive to a receiver. The receiver is taking and receiving that analog command, converting it and adding it to digital to drive the digital decoder. It's using direct current from a battery or even the tracks in some cases. That is, with a direct current, you're no longer driving the tracks. You just have power on the tracks if you're using it that way or in your battery. So I talk about some different dead rail systems. CVP, Airwire, or Revolution. They do provide non-sound control for the locomotives. They also sell what they call their little converter boards, which are those receivers that receive the radio signals. Now the Blue Rail, or now as a lot of people know it, Blue Nami, uses Bluetooth radio from an app on your phone to control a decoder. Cost comparison. That's a fun one. I hear a lot of people say, well, DCC is more expensive than battery or whatever. It's actually the other way around. Battery is more expensive because you have to buy the battery too. You have to buy the receiver, especially if you want sound. And then you have to buy the decoder. And then you have to maintain that battery. And there's some horror stories about people maintaining batteries. In fact, for this convention in Reno, we had a customer who was getting ready to charge all of his batteries for his locomotives and to run for the open house. And well, he went in there and tried charging them and they were all dead. I don't know if he was ever actually able to open, but he called us and said, do you have any batteries? No, we don't. And unfortunately, batteries don't like heat. And that was what he believed happened, is they died from the heat we'd had in the last few days. Several years back, again, in the Reno area, somebody was opening for a Reno Garden and Railways convention. They were working on charging their batteries they had them in a garage. And one of the batteries caught on fire and they lost the entire garage. So batteries are more expensive in that context. I created a couple of little charts pulling prices right off the web using our installation prices for labor and so on. So you see in just the numbers, the battery doesn't look that much more expensive, but you got to figure that's essentially per locomotive. With a DCC system, yes, you have to buy the DCC system. And yes, that can be an expenditure to start with, but you can have any number of locomotives from there, and you don't have to worry about batteries with it. So you can do a lot more with those two decoders than you can with the soundtracks. Are there any other questions, and do you want to come up and see the differences? So the question was, so Rail Pro is basically limited to whatever sounds they have or sell. Whereas with the ESU or Zemo, you can, it's pretty much unlimited. Now, both companies have sound projects, a number of sound projects that are available. They can be customized. It gets into a little bit more work in customizing them, more than most people want to do, actually. But there's any number of sound projects available that can be loaded. And with the loading of a sound project, you can move that decoder from one locomotive to another locomotive and reconfigure it for that locomotive. The question is, to go wireless with DCC, it's quite expensive. So DCC isn't really wireless. It's, you use your phone, you would basically tie your DCC system into your house Wi-Fi, and that's the easiest way to do it. And then you can download the app for your phone that connects to that DCC system or runs that DCC system. So costly, it costs whatever your Wi-Fi system and your phone cost and all that. But really, it isn't really any extra cost when you already have most of that stuff. The question is, it can download the sounds into a decoder for a train, basically. DCC sounds, they're created as sound projects, okay? And they're very small in the size. The WAV files that are used for the sounds are usually compressed. They aren't going to be these giant stereophonic. Most of the time they aren't stereophonic. They are 16-bit, so they're still a reasonable size. I have been able to, with the little digital locomotive there, I have 3 full-length songs on that locomotive with all the other driving sounds on it. So I can, it's just, you can put a lot of stuff in it.